Next, it's time we create a interactive parent actor that will serve as the basis for all of our player-driven interactions throughout the rest of the project, especially those that are placed by the level designer in specific locations based on the LDD. So for that, we're going to right-click here in the content browser, create a new blueprint class that is an actor. We'll call it BP underscore interactive underscore parent. Let's open this up and start work here. So what components do we need? We need components similar to the door actor that mimic the same kind of user experience we're trying to create with a player. So for that matter, we will add a sphere collision component, and this will control when the player gets our prototype UI feedback, so they know what's going on, that there's something in range they can interact with. So call it the interaction radius. And for this, we'll have it set collision wise for overlap only pawn. And next we'll need a second collision, which represents the collision around the actor, the collision that the interaction sphere trace hits from the player. So for that, we're going to make a box collision. We're going to name this interaction collision. And lastly, we want to have a text render component to represent our proto UI pretty much, the same as with the door. Call it interact UI. Okay, so those are nested a little too tightly. Of course, we want to change the interaction radius to something much bigger. Let's set it to 128. Let's try that. Okay, that should be good. And again, depending on the child classes of this actor, we can adjust the scale and positioning of all these components, really, depending on what we need for the child class. But I am going to make this one horizontal align center just to begin with there. So let's give this a name to display to the player that's kind of neutral. We'll call it inspect. That kind of means that they can press their interact button to figure out what they do, what the interaction will essentially do on the particular child class. So that should give us a pretty good basic set of components to use in any child class. And because we're building off of the systems provided to us by Tim Van Can in his course on game design, we're going to use the basic interaction logic that he set up. So to make that happen, we need to add the interface here under class settings that he created earlier that we also use for our door, BPI interaction. There we go. So now this is implemented and we see our interfaces functions available to us. So we're going to go to the event graph now, and we see that we have we have these default events we don't need. We can delete them, but we're going to implement the events based on this interface here. So we'll start with the primary one, event interact, and we'll also add event unlock, because even though this isn't a door, so to speak, there might be a condition that's prevalent in the child class here that needs a different actor to act as sort of a condition that the player needs to have interacted with previously to then interact with this actor here. So we'll keep that idea of locking intact here in this class. So let's add some variables that deal with that kind of conceptual logic. We'll start with obviously is locked. And we'll make this public so we can edit it on the instance in case the actor needs to start off locked. And we'll also start off with another variable, another Boolean called interact complete. This is similar to saying is the door open or not. It's sort of the final state of the interaction. And this, we'll find how this is useful in a moment. I'm going to compile and save that. And we're going to need some different text variables that we use with the interact UI, depending on the condition of gameplay at the moment. We're going to make this a text variable here, and we'll call this interact text, what the player sees when they move within range, prompting them to interact. I'm going to duplicate this to make another text variable, and we'll call this one locked text. What they see when they know the object is locked, there's a condition needed to interact with the object. I'll duplicate this one again to make another text variable, and I'll call this unlocked text. Okay, so that sets up most of our variables that we're going to need. I think probably all of them, really. And we're going to make some of these public as well in case they needed to be changed a little bit on each child class. And those include interact text and lock text and unlock text, depending on the context that makes sense for each child class. Next, we're going to start building out the logic that happens when the event interact is called here. So the first condition that allows anything to happen from this event is whether or not the actor is locked. So we'll do a branch check here, check for that condition. So if it's false, if is locked is false, that means the interaction can continue as planned. So we want to first set this condition to true, interact complete, showing the interaction actually happened. So we'll do set interact complete. We'll connect it here. We'll set it to true. And then we want to have the interact UI be hidden because the player no longer needs any indication of what they should do at this moment, really. So we'll put interact UI here. We'll do set hidden in game, hidden. And if isLocked is true, we want some different things to happen. We want the interact UI to switch to show them the contextually important locked text, right? So what that means is we need to grab the interact UI, add the variable to the event graph, set the text on it to locked text. And lastly, we want to make sure it's being shown. So we want to actually make this not hidden in game. And we'll compile and save this. The last thing we want here when the actor here is interacted with is we want there to be some events that happen that are particular to the child class. So when isLocked is false, the interact happens, it's set as complete, the interact UI vanishes, and then we have an event happen that we're going to add a event as sort of a placeholder to be overridden in each child class. So we're going to right click here, add custom event, name this start events on interact. And I'm going to right click here to add a node comment, and we'll call this override in children, just as a reminder to the LD of how to use this, or anyone else for that matter. So what that means is we'll call this event here at the end of the event interact chain. Event unlock is a little bit simpler. When the event unlock is called, presumably by when the player interacts with a key actor somewhere else in the level, we're going to set isLocked to false. And then we're going to change the interact UI text to display the contextually relevant unlock text. And we'll just add the unlock text to this as a value. Lastly, we need to add some events to when the player comes within range of the interaction radius sphere. So for that, this is very similar to what we did with the door actor earlier. Again, it overlaps only pawn. We're going to do on component begin overlap. We'll add that there. And we'll add on component end overlap right there below it. And for here, we'll check to see if interact is complete because we only want this to happen if the player has not interacted with this fully previously. So we'll do a branch check here for this condition. And I'm going to select both this variable and this branch and copy paste it so that I can add it to the end overlap event. Basically to make the UI appear or disappear. And we'll add the interact UI as a variable. Here we'll do set hidden in game. So if interact complete is false, we allow this to happen. And we set it to hidden as false so the interact UI shows. I'm going to select and copy and paste this here. And again, if this is false, we'll have this allow to be shown in the game. I'm going to compile and save this. Now that we have our core functionality set up for interactions throughout the game, we can start working on the actors we need to add to the level for player progression. Lastly, we'll add some placeholder text as the default setting for each of these text variables. So for interact, we'll just call it something generic called inspect. We might want to change this later on in the child classes, but for now that's fine. Locked text, we'll call it locked, and for unlocked, we'll just call it unlocked. And again, we'll likely change these to make more contextual sense in each child class. But that seems pretty good for now. We'll compile and save this. One final tweak we'll need to make in the component for interaction collision is to set the collision type again to the special interaction collision preset that we used also in the door actor. And that should serve as a pretty useful interactive parent for all of our interactions later throughout the project.